Hey there, thank you so much for joining me for another tutorial. My name is Erin Eno and today we're going to be painting this pretty winter wreath. I'm going to take you through step by step how to paint each of the elements in the wreath and then how we put it all together. So grab your paints and let's get started. So I'll just run through my materials for you. Today I'm using Baohong Academy watercolor paper. It's 140 pound, 100% cotton. I'm using my Van Gogh paints. I have a jar of water and a paper towel, of course. And I have 3 brushes. I have 2 Princeton snap brushes, both round, one in a size 12 and one in a size 4. And I'm also going to be using my Curry's store brand brush in a size 10 round. So the first element that I want to paint is a silver dollar plant, which is called the Lunaria plant, which I didn't know that until I just looked it up. And I'm going to be doing it, obviously they're a little warmer in nature in real life, but I'm just going to do it kind of a silvery gray. Okay, so I've got Payne's gray there and just a tiny amount of blue because my Payne's gray isn't all that blue. And I'm just going to do a few circles like this. Okay, and that's way darker than I want them, but I'm doing that for a reason. I will show you. So I'm just going to first paint all the circles. Just like that. Just some irregular shapes. Obviously they're not perfectly round in real life, so that's fine. Get some more pigment there. Okay, and I'm gonna have one just kind of on top of that one there. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with my paper towel and I'm just going to start picking some of the pigment up. And the reason why I wanted to do that was because I want the pigment, I want the wash to be a little on the uneven side. Okay, because they are a little iridescent and it's slightly translucent in real life. So we're just going to let those dry off and we'll go back and add a little more to them later. But first we're going to move on and do a pine cone. I've just got kind of a mixture of sepia, burnt sienna and yellow ochre, and I'm just kind of mixing these browns as I need them. Okay, so I want to start first with a light wash of brown. And yes, my paper is ripped there, that's why I'm using it for this. So I'm just going to start, and that's even a little too much water, but I'll pick some of that up. And I'm just going to do almost like fish scale things, fish scale shapes. They're like little curves. Okay, and as the pine cone, as we go further down on the pine cone, it's going to get wider, and I'm going to add more of these kind of pine cone tips. Okay, just like that. Then of course, as it gets to the bottom, it's going to come in again. So I'm just, you know, this is just a loose pine cone, so we just want to kind of imply the shape of a pine cone. Once we get that shape and we get some definition with some shading, it's going to come across as a pine cone and your eye will see it that way, even though it's not like a realistic pine cone. Okay, so just like that. And then I'm going to go into a slightly deeper brown, not too much water on my brush, and I'm just going to start tapping in some shading towards the base of these little scales. Okay, just like that. And then we're going to let it dry and add even more shading. but I don't want to go in with a darker color yet, or it will just bleed and turn into a blob of brown. Okay, so we'll just let that sit for a bit and we will come back to that. Meanwhile, I'm going to go get a light wash of the indigo here, and I mean very light, so I'm getting most of the pigment off my brush here, and I'm just going to do these little kind of bud shapes just like this. They're not petals, they're not full flowers, they're just like little buds. Okay, just like that. Then I'm going to tap some of the water off my brush, go into really deep indigo and just paint the stem up. And as I go up, I'm going to branch off and just touch the bottom of these little buds that we did and have them, or have it bleed in, okay? Just like that. They kind of look like white or light blue pussy willows almost. Okay, so that's that one done. And then I'm going to go to my number 4 round brush. This is dry now, so I'm going to go in with a little bit of brown mixed in with that kind of grayish color we were using. Not too much water on my brush, or almost basically dry brushing. So I'm taking all the water off my brush and just dipping the tip of my brush into that wash. And I'm going to just paint around the silver dollar because they have a little bit of a casing around them. And I'm just gonna do a fine line. When I get to this one, the one at the bottom is going to be in front of this one. Okay, so I want this one to take the shape there. Just like that. Okay, and they also have a funny little tip that comes off the end of them. I don't know what that's all about, but it's there. So we'll put it in. Just like that. And I'm going to get a little bit more of that mixture. We can probably make it a little bit darker for the main stem because it's actually a little bit of a twig. Okay, so I'm just going to run this all the way up to this guy here, and then the other ones will kind of branch off from that. Okay, and they can be kind of crooked, just like that. That one you wouldn't see. We'll kind of tuck it through from there. Okay, so that is our silver dollar plant, and the pine cone has dried enough that we can go in. So I'm going to go back to my number 10 brush, and I'm going to get some deeper brown by just adding some of that sepia in there. And we're just going to go in now and start putting in some more defined shadows towards the core, the center part of the pine cone. Okay, so those tips should stand out a little more now, and we'll get a little bit of depth. And you can even kind of come down if you want to just really kind of define some of those tips. I think that should do it. That'll probably dry a little lighter as well. But there is our loose pine cone. Now I'm going to take my number 4 brush and go into the indigo again. And we're just going to do some berries. Okay, so they're just going to be round berries, and I'm going to leave a little bit of a highlight on them. And you can do as many or as few as you want. And that's all going to change when you go to put them on your wreath anyway. You're going to just use whatever the wreath needs. Now I can go in with some deeper indigo and just tap that in to some of them. Make them a little richer. I'm going to take almost straight indigo and make some of them really deep. Just like that. And then for the stem, I'm going to use the dark brown here, which is sepia with a little bit of the burnt umber, or burnt sienna rather. I don't have burnt umber, I should get some. And then we're just going to do the stem for all the berries. And because they're dark, if we hit the berry and it kind of starts to bleed in a bit, that's okay, because the berries are so dark anyway. Okay, so there is our little sprig of berries. Then we're going to do a sprig of pine. Again, I'm going to use the indigo, and I'm going to use a pretty light wash. Okay, so I'm just going to do one up this way and one up this way, and I'm just going to drag my brush out with quick little strokes for the pine needles, just like that. Okay, and I find you get finer tips on them if you go from the center out, okay, because you're flicking your wrist and getting the light wisp portion on the outer edge like that. So if you have to turn your paper, turn your paper. It's all good. Okay, so I want to add some deeper tones to that as well. Don't want it to really bleed too much, but I just want some deeper needles as well. I probably should have let that dry first, but I will let that dry and go back in with some darker pigment. And then I'm going back to the indigo again. I know, I'm indigo happy. And I'm going to take most of the pigment off my brush and get a light wash and just do some simple leaf shapes, just like this. I'm keeping them very wet. And then I'm going to go into the sepia again. Almost straight sepia. I want it pretty dark. There we go. And I'm going to do a stem for the leaves. And I'm going to come up and just touch the bottom of the petals of the leaves that we just painted. Oh, that was really thick. I didn't want it that thick. Oh well. Just make sure I don't do that on the wreath. Okay, so that's going to bleed in. Then I'm going to clean off my brush, and I'm going to get a little bit of the yellow ochre and just get a yellowy goldy brown in here. Okay, and I'm just going to tap a little bit just on the tips or even some of the edges of these leaves, and just let that kind of bleed out a bit. Okay. And while it's still wet, I'm going to take my number 6 brush, or 4 rather, sorry. Did I call it 6 before? And it's got no water in it now, and I'm just going to make sure it's got a nice, shaped into a nice point. And I'm going to go into the sepia brown, and I'm just going to drag it up lightly to get a bit of a vein effect on these leaves. I keep calling them petals. Okay, just like that. And we'll let that bleed out and see how it goes. I may change my mind when it comes to the wreath and just do plain blue. We'll see. And before we wrap things up, I'm just going to go back to the pine sprig here and just add in those darker pine needles that I wanted. And I'm just going to bring some up the center. And what I want to do is go into the sepia and just add a little bit of brown to this stem here. Okay, so here are all the pieces that we're going to be using to build our wreath. So I'm just going to tidy this up and then we'll get right to it. So before we start our wreath, we're going to need to draw a circle. My paper is roughly 10 by 10. Unfortunately, it's not square, but it'll do. That's okay. So then I'm going to kind of just eyeball the center, roughly here. And then I'm going to just start drawing my circle. Hopefully it will be semi-round. It's just a rough guideline. As long as you're not too far off, you'll be okay. Or you can just get something round to kind of trace around. Unfortunately, I didn't have anything handy this size, so that's why I'm just going to eyeball it. But it should do. It's really rough up here. That's a little better. Just look at it head on. And it can actually come up a little higher all the way on this side. Like that. And I think that should do. Now I've made a mess on my paper, so I'm going to erase the lines that I don't want. So I've erased all the lines I didn't want, and we're left with our circle guideline. I just lightened that with my Kneadable Eraser, and I'm going to start with painting light to dark, which is basically the watercolor rule. So I'll start with the silver dollar, and I'll just do one in real time, and then the other ones I'll speed up, just so we don't make this video horrendously long. So I'm just going to take that wash that we have for the gray, okay, and I'm just going to do the circles that we did for the silver dollar, plant. These might be a little big. We're going to find out. And I'll do one up here. You know what? I'll do one out here. That'll work. Kind of didn't want them touching, but that's okay. Okay, and then we're going to take our paper towel and blot up some of that pigment, just like that. They're probably a little darker than I would want, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, and I will speed up and do another couple around the wreath. Okay, so now I'm going to start placing a couple of pine cones. Okay, so I've got to go in and get that light mixture that we use just to do the little tips. Okay, so that was quite a light mixture. I'm just going to push some of that aside. Get a lot of that pigment off my brush, and we'll do a pine cone. And I may do this a little smaller than I did in the demo, but it's all good. I don't want the wreath to get too crazy big. Okay, and I'm just going to take some of that pigment out of those top ones. So I'm just lifting it out with my brush. Okay, now I'm going to go in to the darker, a little bit darker pigment, but not too much water on my brush. Okay, and just lightly start tapping in some of that shading towards the bottom of these guys. That's not quite dark enough. I'm going to add a little bit more pigment. And that's bleeding more than I would want. I may have to lift some of this out, but we'll see. I think it'll still kind of give you the impression of a pine cone, but I will lift a little bit of it, that dark out from towards the outer edges. It just kind of went a little rogue on me. But actually I don't mind the overall look of it, actually. Okay, so there's a pine cone. Looks a little different than the one we did, but it'll do the job. And I'll speed up and do the others. Okay, so we've got a few pine cones. I've kind of made this one tuck under that one a little bit, just for something a little different. Now I think we can go into our silver dollar plant. So I'm going to take my number 4 and we'll finish the outside and the kind of twigs on the silver dollar plant. So again, I'm going to bring that brown into that gray like we did in the demo part. Okay. Just like that. And I'm going to actually do a light wash of that. Bring a little bit more of the gray. Okay, so again, this is where we dry brushed. So I'm taking all of the water off my brush, just putting the tip into that wash. So then we just dry brush around the silver dollars. Like that. And I'm going to make this one be on top of that one. And we'll do the little tip on the end. This one was a little heavy, or a little thick. Didn't want it that thick. Okay, now we'll go in and add a little more brown to this, so it's a little bit darker, and we'll just do our stem for our silver dollar. So this is going to be a little crooked, like a twig, because it is more like a twig. And then we just branch off to the silver dollars. And I will continue on now with the others. I did get my hand in the pine cone, so I'm going to have to clean this up. Hopefully I can get this up. If not, we'll put a berry there or something. Yeah, we'll be putting a berry there. Okay, so now we're going to do the light blue ones that look kind of like a pussy willow, and I'm going to use my number 10 round. I'm just getting a light wash of that blue. I'm going to tuck a sprig of it in here. You can kind of go anywhere you want really at this point. Okay, so well, that's a little too blue. I want it even lighter than that. Okay, and then we'll go into some dark indigo and just do a stem that comes up here and touches those. They might be a little darker than I wanted, but that's okay. It's all good. So now I'm going to my number 4 brush, and we're going to throw some berries in. And this is just the initial round. Like when we're done, when I'm done, you know, putting some in of each, I'll just go in and add more where I think it could use it. So I'm going to use this opportunity to put some berries here and cover up that mistake I did with my hand. Okay, and we can put some berries. That's awfully big. We can put some berries on top of the silver dollar plant here because they are darker, so that's cool. And then we'll get the straight indigo and do the little stems to the berries. Actually, that's not right. We used brown for that stem. We used the sepia. Let's try this again. So we'll do the sepia stem to the berries. Just like that. Okay, and I'll put in a few more. Okay, so I just wanted to point out that I just put a berry behind the silver dollar, or the stem of the silver dollar there. So just keep in mind and tuck the odd thing behind the other. It just makes it a little more natural looking. So now we're going to go on to, I think we're going to do the pine needles. Okay, so I'm going to go in with my number 4. It was a little watered down, and we'll just do some pine sprigs. Okay, I have one coming this way. This one will go on top of that one and behind the pine cone. Okay, so I'm not painting over the pine cone. So now I'm just going in with the deeper blue to just add some darker pine needles. That's not quite enough paint on my brush there. I was just kind of hesitant to load my brush. I didn't want it to bleed all over the place, so, but it's okay. It seems to be dry enough. Okay, so we're not going over the pine cone. And I'm going to go in with straight indigo and just kind of heavy up the little twig like that. Maybe put in some even deeper color needles. Okay, and if you remember, I went in with the sepia and just added a bit of brown to that stem. That's awfully dry. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to add some more pine sprigs all around, and some will go over the other elements just to kind of shake things up a bit. Okay, so now we're down to our last element, which are these leaves here. And after this bled out, I wasn't really thrilled with it. So I may leave this out or just do very, very little amount. Okay. So those started with a very light wash of indigo. So I'll just get most of the pigment off of my brush, and we'll just throw some leaves in here. Even that's too dark. And I am going to make these just slightly smaller as well, because my wreath isn't all that big. I'm going to make sure these stay fairly wet though. I'll put one behind up here. It's the kind of behind ones that are kind of a pain in the butt, but it's all good. Okay, so we have that one, maybe one down here. It's a little dark. Okay, I want to keep these wet so the stem will bleed into that. So that's going over that silver dollar. So now I'm going to clean off my brush and go in and get that sepia color, and we'll just do a stem. It'll be behind the pine cone, and just kissing that leaf, that one, and that one, and coming out to that one. Okay, and I think I will try to put in just a little bit of that yellow, not so much, not as much as I did in the demo. Okay, just water that down, and I'll just very lightly tap some in there. Okay, barely noticeable. Maybe I'll do a little bit more. There we go. Okay, just like that. Then go to our number 4 brush again with no water on it, and just drag that sepia up to be the vein running down the middle. There's not a lot of sepia here, so it'll be very faint, but that's okay. There we go. So I'll just go around and put a few more of those in. Okay, so now I'm just going to step back and look at this and just kind of add things as I think they are needed, and I will also speed that up for you. So here is the finished wreath. I'm actually quite happy with it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and that you found it helpful, and maybe you're inspired to give this a go on your own. If you do and you're on Instagram, please share and tag me. And for more beginner-friendly tutorials, please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell to know when I have new videos out. So that's it for today, guys. Take care, and I will see you in the next one.